Welcome everybody. This is another Kinder Catalyst conversation, and today I'm joined by Peter Anderson from Vocalized. Hello Peter.
Hi there.
We're going to hear more about a participatory online platform which can connect, link and share resources for community initiatives in Leeds and other cities. I think there are obvious advantages in this, but we're going to hear more about them shortly. And I'm now going to hand over to Peter to introduce the project, where it's come from, and the benefits of an online participatory platform. Over to you, Peter.
Great. Thanks very much, Josh. Thanks very much indeed. And hello to everyone here. Nice to see you all. I hope to connect with you later in the talk. I'll share a screen and you can watch the slides, hopefully provide some pictures to the narrative. So as Josh alluded to, we've been working up the idea of a participatory city project, and I'll give some background to where that's come from and where we hope to take it. The idea here, as you can see, is to enable coordinated collective action around high impact projects. So the idea is being very practical. What seems to be lacking in many initiatives is the sort of engine of change. There's an awful lot of projects that have a great narrative of change, but it's like, well, how do we actually enable this? And a journey that I've been on for around 15 years now, perhaps longer, to see how we can develop technology to support that as well. So enabling a blended approach of digital and face-to-face to enable this coordinated collective action that so many people want to see, and to bring about the changes that we want to see in society that, you know, are becoming more desperate by the day, it feels, at the moment. We seem to have I don't like to use the word perfect storm, but we have a storm brewing, obviously with COVID and Brexit and the climate agenda. These three things coming together over the next 6 months are going to be, you know, thoroughly challenging. So I'll just go through high level aspiration to start with, and then we can drill down into some of the detail of the platform and the case studies and how we see this potentially scaling up. So the vision here is imagining if many of the positive initiatives in the city of Leeds here in particular could connect, linked up and share tools and resources with support from community organisers and an online platform to help create a healthy city environment in which people, places and planet can flourish. So the idea is to try to work and move from silo working to collaboration. We often see so many projects that are great initiatives and sort of flagship initiatives, but the challenge is obviously scaling those up across the cities and across the counties and communities. So there's a lot of many positive but disconnected great initiatives, and what would happen if we could reach a greater level of coherence. And we're really looking at trying to bring some sort of mechanics and reality to the idea of this system change project, which we see on the banners inside the marches, for instance, when the youth are marching, or in Extinction Rebellion or whatever it is. People are sort of asking for system change, not climate change. But how do we go about that? And obviously there's going to be technology involved, and what might that look like? So a little bit my background. I started on a community platform about 17 years ago called Localize with an L. And the idea of that was to create a comprehensive resource management system for communities. It seemed to me to be an obvious thing to do, to make the resources in a community available to people. So what land is available, what empty buildings, what skills, and nowadays, you know, what's the carbon footprint of our community, what's the wellbeing index, all these sorts of things would be really helpful to be able to see those for our community if we're going to try to make progress. If I want to set up an aquaponics farming facility, or I want to grow trees, or whatever it is, it'd be really good to be able to see these, and then to have the indicators and all of these sorts of things to be able to monitor progress from year to year. And then around 5 or 6 years into that, after winning various different awards and funds for that, I started going to these conferences, people like Vandana Shiva, Jonathan Porritt, and other people who are advocating for grassroots democracy as the answer to local and global issues. And so, just going to admit someone there. Will you do the admitting, Josh?
Yes, I'm doing the admitting. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. And so these people would tend to talk about the problem for 90% of their talk, and then at the end they would tag on this thing about grassroots democracy being the answer to these issues. But back then, this was sort of 12 years ago now, I couldn't find anyone really who was trying to actually solve that problem at that level. So I did my own investigation into grassroots democracy, and you find that ward structure, which is kind of abstract in a sense. And so I decided to start building a platform that would enable grassroots engagement at the ward level, because that seemed to be the grassroots infrastructure for the United Kingdom. So, as you know, I won't go on too much. I'm going to do the opposite of their talk. Their talks were usually 90% about the problems and sort of 5 or 10% on the solutions. I'm sure you're all aware of the problems that we're facing. So the element and the focus of this talk really is what is the opportunity that lies in the crisis. And there's a school of thought that the solutions that we need already exist, but tend to operate in silo. The silo case studies, we see them on TED or we see them on Facebook, and we share them into a social media platform, but that doesn't necessarily make those ideas come to life, right? Those you just end up getting some likes and a little conversation about it, but it doesn't necessarily make the project happen. So what would it take? What sort of platform do we need that we can be able to share these ideas into, where they can actually end up coming to fruition of some kind? So the vision here is really to take the best social, financial, environmental projects and collate them into a repository and enable them to be discovered, adapted and replicated across the city. And to do this as well in a coordinated fashion, so that the working groups that have all opted in to adapt and replicate a certain project can then be brought together, and coordinated collective action can be enabled. So that's really the idea, is this sort of higher level of coherence, which will be coordinated collective action around high impact projects, and then trying to align that with the development priorities of the city and other sort of methodologies like donut economics. So the question is then, as we were saying right at the beginning, it's like, what would be the mechanics of change such as this? And the first, well, there's sort of two elements of it really that we're focusing on at the moment. One element is the community organizing. So that's enabling communities to be able to discover ideas, prioritize ideas through rating and deliberation and debating, and then to opt into working groups to be able to progress those ideas and create action plans and implement them. And the other element is about creating a repository, a solutions repository that these communities can discover. And David Thorpe actually has just joined us, who has been working for a couple of months on creating that repository. We'll talk to him a little bit later. He's collated around 200 solutions so far. And we're trying to also link those solutions to tangible case studies that have happened in communities. But these repositories, there's quite a few of them around, but what no one's done yet is link these websites that sort of have a page on what you could potentially do and perhaps a download, linking that to, as I was saying, the process of actually being able to organize around that solution. So these solutions, we've ended up getting quite a few case studies over the last sort of, what would I say, 5 to 10 years. Case studies in communities, in schools, in colleges. So in communities, the process turns into fruition with projects like food box schemes, the planting trees, going plastic free, new bus services, all this sort of thing. These are how these are the sorts of ideas that people prioritize and organize around and implement. And in schools, we've seen things like new sports equipment, and new menus, vegan menus, again, schools going plastic free, growing box schemes and this sort of stuff, and walking buses. So the initial first sort of step really is around enabling all communities and all schools to express their voice for their organisation. It's a really basic step that generally we haven't done. And it was interestingly, in biomimicry terms, you could call it signalling. We just haven't enabled a process whereby our communities and our schools and our organisations can signal what our priorities actually are. So there's a little map of the wards in Leeds. So the first ambition would be to see a set of priorities from a portion or a percentage of the residents within those communities. And you can imagine that data would be fascinating in terms of being able to see what the residents want to engage with, and we'd also be able to see the trends across the city. So we'd then be able to link up working groups where people have actually opted in to say, I actually want to be more involved in these projects, be able to link those up across the city and enable that coordinated collective action I was talking about. So as a complementary to this, we need to train up people to support that process, and we've called that community organising, and there's a certain range of skills that people need to learn and be supported, because it's kind of a new culture we're trying to bring about, and these are new processes. So it's participatory democracy, it's participatory budgeting, it's action planning, it's reporting, it's crowdsourcing. It's those types of new skills that people need support, and that's the sort of fabric of communities we need to build out to enable the action to happen. And then obviously coming together and linking up experts who can do things like feasibility studies, and can bring in expertise to be able to support those working groups to act on their priorities. So again, just to summarize, we're digitizing, we're democratizing democracy, which kind of has a nice term to it, or ring to it. A lot of things, as you know, have been democratized over the last 50 years or so, but democracy seems to be one of those things that's been left behind. We engage in our democracy once every 4 years with a pen and a small piece of paper, which is certainly not an empowering democracy where everybody has a voice and feels heard. So there's a lot of disempowerment in democracy, but democracy is just the first aspect of what you might call the feedback loop, having people's voices heard. And obviously, as I was saying before, it's a combination of face-to-face and online engagement. Just going back to this one, obviously the probably more online engagement going forward, and I think this is one of the opportunities that COVID has actually supported with, in that so many people have learned Zoom and online deliberation where they would not have previously. Now that's individuals and also governments. I mean, the Welsh government, as an example, wasn't using online deliberation tools before COVID. So it's actually saved us an awful lot of work in terms of trying to support people to be able to engage and give people the capacity and the tools to engage in a higher level of organising. So that's one of the positives. I know there were lots of negatives, but so we're trying to move from dead-end consultations. You'll be familiar with the consultations that many of us have been to, with thousands of post-it notes, big sheets of paper, big marker pens, big tables, and then someone has to sort of write that up at the end, or rolls it up and it ends up in the back of someone's car, and perhaps will get emailed 3 months later with a report. You know, that's generally how consultations, or a lot of them that I've been to certainly, have taken place. And obviously that's not a continuous conversation. It's not a method for highly functional organising. And again, participatory budgeting is becoming a lot more prolific. A lot more people are doing it these days. And it's an opportunity to take the budgets that are in the public domain and actually make them public. You'd be surprised how many budgets actually have a mandatory public engagement on them, but the public don't know anything about them. So it's about identifying what those budgets are, putting them up into the public domain, and then enabling the public to have a say on how those budgets are spent. So again, in summary, let's identify what money is available, let's prioritize the ideas, and then let's organize projects in line with those priorities. So I'm going to go into some case studies now. Susan, if you're still with us, perhaps you would like to talk a little bit about the case study in Pennard.
Hi, yes, I am still here. So I was responsible for running the Swansea Rural Voice Project, and Pennard is one of the rural wards of Swansea. Actually, you can see the beach behind me. So part of the remit in Pennard was the community council wanted to increase the amount of community engagement they were doing from nothing. So anything was going to be a positive step forward. So we used the platform to engage with the community council and the community. We held face-to-face engagement meetings as well for those who struggled online. And we provided the coffee and cake, and they came and did the communicating. This, I think Peter's just gone past the top idea on the platform. This was quite a triumph for the young people in the community. They want a skate park. They created a video in less than 12 hours that demonstrated the need for a skate park by showing all the inappropriate places they were skating, and also how to engage with the platform. And so there you can see the number of people engaged, currently at 186. That went from 37 people to 178 in 48 hours after the video went live and the young people shared it. So on the basis of that engagement, they've secured £10,000 from the community council and some land on which to put the skate park, £10,000 from the community charity, and they've also committed to raise, I think it's £5,000 themselves, so that they've got £25,000 as match funding to hopefully go out and get it funded and put in place. So that was a great success. They had lots of smaller successes as well, and the community council decided to take things a little bit further and actually put £5,000 a year onto the platform to pay for the top priorities that came off it. And so in the first year, they funded a water refill station. So instead of your traditional drinking fountain, it's put your bottle under it, press the button and fill up your bottle. So they funded that. Litter pickers and hoops that are stored at the local pubs for the community to take on their walks and do litter picks. And also they use some of the funding to match fund another grant for a feasibility study for a £500,000 project for a community hub on the playing field. So all of those ideas weren't on the radar of the community council at all. And so they were so excited by that they repeated the process and a further year. And the outcome of that is that they're paying for fencing, working with the school to install a community garden. So that will be with sessions for the school, sessions for the community, and sessions for both school and community to work together. So great opportunities for some intergenerational engagement there as well. And we're currently on the third year, so who knows what this year will bring. So we've had some really great outcomes from this. And one of the things that also came out of it, Peter's there, is that because a lot of the ideas on the platform were environmental in nature, the community council declared a climate and ecological emergency. Gave themselves 6 months to put a plan together, which wasn't very long at all. And so they're being hampered a little bit by COVID, but they're currently working on their first year plan for reducing their carbon footprint. So yeah, it's been a huge success in this community and has actually provided a lot of projects that can be replicated across other communities as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Susan. Yeah, thanks so much. So I think you can see there that this is all achievable in any community, especially I mean, it depends what question you're asking, doesn't it, and what the priorities of the city are. But on the environmental front, for instance, certainly possible to support communities to come up with the idea of declaring a climate emergency, show them the Pennard example, and then that leads to the requirement for a climate emergency action plan. And if they're going to do an action plan, then they need to engage more residents, and in that process they can use the platform to identify what the priorities are and form working groups and be supported in that way. So I'm just going to give you a case study from education, and then David, perhaps you'd like to talk about solutions after that. It'll be in a few minutes. So let's Cardiff Council, they were going for a UNICEF child-friendly city badge. I think they still are, actually, and they need to demonstrate that they are having a big conversation with young people, and we convinced them that installing community organising and participatory democracy inside the schools as part of pupil and learner voice was a better idea than just sending out SurveyMonkey and doing post-it notes. So the way that we actually implemented that was we set up all the schools. There are 120 schools in Cardiff, and this is a leaderboard of activity in those schools. And you can see here this is a secondary school, a primary school, and there's around 15 there that are engaged so far. And you can see that there's around 50%, just less than 50% of this secondary school, for instance, that are engaged. And with this primary school, you can see there's around 90%. And so some of these primary schools have actually got 100% engagement. The way they've got 100% engagement is by integrating into digital literacy or the digital competency or English literacy frameworks, so that they're actually using it on a weekly basis. With the secondary schools, because they use intranets, the platform embeds with a single sign-on process, so they don't have to register and log in. So that's really effective. So there's actually a call to action inside their SharePoint that they use every day. So you can see here there's suggested 150 ideas and there's 16,000 interactions, 1,500 comments, and this is most interesting for me, there's 750 pledges. So that's pledges from students that want to get more involved in projects, because this is a big issue, you know, once you have reached your priorities or understand what your priorities are, so who's actually going to provide the capacity to make these things happen. And here 750 students are saying they want to get more involved in the planning of and implementation of these projects. So let's just have a look at one of those as an example. So the top priority here, this is Catay's secondary school in Cardiff, 132 ideas. Top rated idea is no banning of phones, rated by 127 students. You can see the comments here are all for and against and neutral. It's all anonymous, so it takes the heat out of the or the personality out of the conversation. So they're usually really, you know, good conversations and not necessarily what you'd find on social media. And you can see here, as well as providing what the priorities are, it also tells you who wants to be more involved and creates volunteer teams. So here you can see 21 students have actually opted in to become a volunteer team, and the community organizer can basically copy their contact details and then organize, let's say, a Zoom meeting in this particular case. And then once on a Zoom meeting, they can start to create the tasks in terms of what is it we actually need to do to be able to implement this particular project. So that might be getting more information, it might be putting posters up, it might be making a presentation to the senior management team or something like that. So you put in the tasks in here and assign those tasks to the relevant people, you know, so it becomes more like project management at that stage. All right, so you're going to kind of see how we're moving around the feedback loop. And you'll see here there's this button, Discover Great Ideas, and this is kind of the opportunity for students to be able to discover what are the best ideas in their sector, in this case secondary schools and students, that they could be potentially replicating in this school. And this is the project that we're working on at the moment with Swansea Environment Forum. They've actually funded to be able to create a repository, which is currently under development. David, I don't know if you're still with us, whether you'd like to say a few things about this repository.
Okay, yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fine. So my background is that in the 90s I worked at the Centre for Alternative Technology. I've been an environmental journalist. I've written about 10 different non-fiction academic books on different aspects of ecological technologies, and probably the most important are the One Planet Life and One Planet Cities, which came out last year, I think. And so One Planet Cities, basically in that whole period I've been collecting practical solutions from all over the world, and with my kind of investigative journalist hat on, I guess, I tend to look at them quite closely and scrutinise them to see whether they actually are what they claim to be, since many things claim to be green and are not necessarily green. And so part of the book, One Planet Cities, is about investigating what kind of standards we should use to assess whether or not we're going to work within the planetary boundaries. I noticed that, thank you for getting that up, Pete. I noticed that if you want to go to the One Planet, the oneplanetlife.com is more appropriate, but that is the book. So the oneplanetlife.com is the website of the One Planet Centre, which I manage, and we do sort of consultancy, teaching, capacity building, and so on. One of the things we did recently was to create a local development strategy for rural Swansea, which looked at what needed to be in place for social and ecological justice to get down to one. You're on, yeah, that's right. I don't know where that's. It's the oneplanetlife.com. That seems to be a completely different website, Pete. I don't know where that one came from. That's better. I noticed that earlier on you saw a slide with Kate Ray with donut in it. So the idea of the donut is one of the things that's in my head. The book One Planet Cities was written to see how humanity can get to within the donut, which, as perhaps you might know, Dan O'Neill from Leeds University has done some work on this, and his team, and they figured out that nowhere in the world, at the country level at least, exists within the donut. So at the end of One Planet Cities, I come up with the idea of how do we, what do we need to do, what framework do we need to adopt in order to get to that magic space, which is social and ecological justice for everyone, with the needs of future generations in mind. So that's a bit of a long-winded way of getting around to the idea that as far as this web portal goes that we're creating, that's the kind of criteria that I've been having in my head. As for the audiences, obviously solutions are dependent upon the audience, and the way you write about and communicate those solutions are dependent upon the audience. So the solutions are targeted variously at ordinary households, at educational institutions, at councils and public bodies, small and large businesses, and so on. This is what you're looking at now is an early version of the website, which doesn't actually have yet or any of the solutions that I've created, except the one in the middle of the bottom. But this is just stuff that's been put in there for the time being in order to show it to people and let them see what it would visually look like. The kind of user journey that you would expect people possibly to do, at any rate, to be encouraged to do, is to figure out where they're at the moment in terms of their ecological footprint or their carbon footprint, and then somehow they get feedback on where they could most profitably invest some time to change that and reduce their footprint. They can skip that if they like and just go to the usual 5 or 10 solutions that could make the most difference. And then they'll be encouraged to come back if they try those and have another go at the calculator and see if what they've done makes any difference. So we're at the stage we're at the moment is that 55 solutions have been written and they're currently being checked and proofread, and they'll go into the second stage. Then they'll be put into the website, and then the website itself will be tested. And for each solution, there is case studies and a whole set of resources that people can click on for further information. And basically the type of, the style of the writing and it is tailored to the audience. So the households would get a slightly simplified version of solutions, and councils and so on would get a bit more technical description of what might be involved.
Right. Yeah, thanks very much, David. Brilliant. So you can see, you know, that a crucial part of the process is creating this repository of ideas, but by itself is not going to do a huge amount. It's going to sit on a website as PDFs, but we want to combine that with community organizing. So the relevant stakeholders, whether that be students in schools or staff in schools, whether that be residents in communities or tenants in housing associations, or as David said, some more complex solutions for staff members in councils, they can all discover the relevant solutions and start to prioritize and organize around those. So I think what I'll do next is just give you an overview of the Vocalized community organizing process. You've kind of seen the platform, but this is the sort of full process and ambition of the platform.
Vocalize, an innovative platform for community organizing. Here's how. Create a group, start topics of conversation, promote to your community, encourage them to suggest, rate and debate ideas. This creates clear priorities. Organize regular meetings, set agendas from your priorities, form working groups, crowdsource projects, share the best projects so they can be discovered, adapted and replicated anywhere. Tap into the wisdom of your communities. Turn great ideas into action.
There we are. So that's it in 30 seconds. It's never easy to do. And then there's you know, a little bit more detail on the community organizing process, or feedback loop, as you might say. And for each element of the feedback loop, we've tried to develop a module. So whether that's creating topics, you know, obviously that's where you need to start. What are the questions we want to ask? What money is available? And then we're going to do an engagement strategy. We're going to identify what the priorities are from our community. And then we're going to try and integrate that voice that we've developed, the community voice, the staff voice, the tenant voice, the learner voice, the pupil voice, into the existing democratic structure, because almost all organizations already have some sort of staff forum, community council, this sort of thing. So it's integrating into the existing democratic structure, make sure we influence that agenda with the priorities coming out of the voice, and then enabling the working groups to take some of that capacity and provide that capacity to take things forward, so it's not all a massive burden on those governing councils. And those working groups then supporting them to create action plans and crowdsource their projects into tangible solutions. And where you get really good case studies of things happening, then updating the templates or creating new templates for everybody in those similar stakeholder types, so similar audiences to discover for themselves. And then on each side here, you've got the sort of skills that you might need to learn. And these are the skills we'd want to teach community organizers to be able to enable and support communities to take this activity. So that's that. I'm just going to whiz through these slides. I think we've kind of touched on most of this. You know, it's going beyond social media and liking and tweeting through to something hopefully more meaningful in terms of rating and prioritizing and pledging. So it's more action orientated and enabling ongoing conversations rather than just this sort of snapshots in time that we get, even though those snapshots in time are really helpful in collaboration with this. We've talked about the schools, pupil and student and learner voice, and there's lots of other stories and case studies around that on the blog, which is blog.vocalized.org. If you want to read up more case studies there, little videos like this one here from the primary school, where the kids, we spend 45 minutes training the children how to be community organizers, and then they engage with all of year 5 and all of year 6 throughout what we call a democracy day. So they actually do the work with my support, and they learn those skills, the basic skills, in 45 minutes. So it just shows, you know, if these kids year 5 and year 6 can do it, then hopefully anyone can. And it is obviously inspiring to see these young kids doing this. And here you can see these other participation team here at the front of the class, helping to engage, and they're doing a lot of sort of content moderation, that sort of thing. I've told you about the Child Friendly City project and how they launched that. The way that we actually ran that was to teach one secondary school how to use the process for about a month. And they, in this big arena here in Cardiff City Hall, they trained 7 other secondary schools. So that was a really effective process. And yeah, another thing to mention is that when you register with Vocalized, you put your postcode in and you have the option of joining your community ward. So as Vandana Shiva and all these other people were saying, that grassroots democracy is the answer to our local and global issues, that's why one of the foundations of Vocalized is the ward. So you'll find that, for instance, here you can see in related groups to Cates, you'll see all the other wards. Well, these are actually all the other schools. And if we can go into Pennard, for instance, we'd be able to see all of the wards there. Perhaps I could look at Leeds. And if you were to register with the platform, it would put you into your geographic community. So here's Leeds district now. And then if we go into related groups, we'd see all the wards here, which you might recognize some of those names, perhaps. So the idea here would be to create a leaderboard here so that we'd be able to see how things are progressing and which communities are doing really well and which ones aren't doing so well, and obviously make case studies out of the ones that are doing really well and provide extra support to those that aren't. So yeah, another thing to say, I suppose, is we're working in about 6 colleges throughout the United Kingdom. It's been used in colleges for about 6 years now, and they use it to underpin their learner voice and provide participatory budgeting. Susan's given you the overview of Pennard and community case studies and how that can lead to community climate change action plans. I think that's something that we could be doing across the country. We know that the councils have declared climate emergency, but it'd be great to bring that down to the local level. So I'll just talk about now the participatory city model. Essentially, all that is taking these educational case studies and these community case studies and putting that into a county-wide model. In Swansea, we have 36 communities and we have around 80 to 100 schools. And I'm just going to find the link here. And so we've basically we've written a project plan for the lottery and submitted that. So there's essentially a project plan that anyone else in any other city or county could take and adapt for their area and try to gain funding for it once they'd identified the community anchors. Swansea Council declared climate emergency in June last year, and they see this as a really important mechanism for being able to implement their plan. So looking at their action plan, about 60 to 80% of it was all about youth engagement and citizen engagement. And again, the question is, what's the mechanics of that? So that's really, what we'd like to collaborate with you on in Leeds, is creating your own action plan and project plan for participatory Leeds. And then I think, Josh, you wanted me to just mention where we saw this potentially going. There's various different people in different cities and counties who are taking this model that we've developed and identifying community anchors in their area, making a presentation to them and starting to adapt their plan. And we saw that this could potentially be the foundations of what you might call a participatory planet, if we can get enough people to develop action plans at that level, because actually we're all having very similar conversations. If you think about the 25,000 schools that are in the United Kingdom, they're all asking very similar questions, and there's probably 5 or 10 really top high impact solutions that they need to organize around in the first instance. So that actually simplifies, a massively complicated problem where we can actually provide that support for those high impact projects and enable the coordinated collective action around those high impact projects in the first instance. And so we have this brand that we're trying to build up, which would be a container for the associates who are sort of working to enable those participatory projects in their area, whether that be a participatory city, a participatory county or community. And yeah, that's really where we've got to. Joshua, do you want to summarise and maybe we can go to questions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Peter. I think one of the major elements of this is the how-to. How do we operationalise and facilitate community change, community participation, and resource different projects in a way that they can learn from each other, where the projects can be visible to each other. And in a way, all this is necessary because we don't have a media which actually allows us to do that, because they have different priorities, of course. And so I'm seeing this Vocalized platform being a way to move to a model of mutualize, which effectively really is co-resourcing, co-learning, enabling people to see what other people are doing and co-producing solutions that are meaningful to communities. Because we're focusing on the ward level, to me, this is the perfect solution for any local councillor who wants their community to flourish, and also to be able to communicate with them and for them to be able to communicate with each other. So this whole idea of coherence, of a network of communities of practice, which some of you may have heard of as a theory of social change, allows a greater complexity of collaboration and allows new solutions to emerge, as well as solutions that we know of to be put into practice. So that's how I see it. I see any city that is able to adopt a platform like this, or this particular platform, as being as moving ahead of the game in terms of operationalizing change and localizing democracy in a way that can harvest the strengths and capabilities of residents who have huge capabilities, huge range of skills, but don't have a way of connecting them together or finding out about what other people are doing. There are of course, community networks already, and there are people who are very active on the ground, but just the idea of a network of city anchor institutions providing a platform like this for their audiences, their communities, raises the game in the sense that it enables people an opportunity that they don't have at the moment. So, as well as being a new institution for facilitating change and facilitating communication and transparency, it's actually a whole new level of visibility that allows people to find the projects that they want to work on, see the successes that are happening, because I think people seeing other people's successes, seeing models that work and finding out about models that they don't know about is hugely important. I'd just like to mention one model which I would hope would be part of the repository, which the charity that I work for, the Network of Wellbeing, has pioneered, which is called the Share Shed. Well, the Share Shed is a library of equipment, a library of things, so that you don't actually have to buy a lawnmower, you can borrow one. You don't have to buy a food processor, you can borrow one. You don't have to buy a tent for the family or even suitcases. And what that does, it reduces consumption. It gives people an opportunity to practice being green. It facilitates that in a way that takes away the responsibility from the individual and takes it onto the community in a coherent way. So there's probably millions of projects, well, thousands of projects probably, that are as inspiring as the Share Shared, which has had huge success, by the way. I'm very happy to talk to people about that if you want to hear more. But I'm absolutely passionate about this online platform because it's the first one that I've seen that allows networks to attain coherence and answer many of the problems that many of us have been talking about for many years. So that's my little party political broadcast. But I'd like to open the conversation out. I mean, I think it's useful to have challenges. So if you've got a constructive question, even no matter how challenging it is, please share. And I think what I would like to do is I'd like to hear from other people. I know that some of you are already involved, but I'm just going to open it up to the floor. So,
Joy, nice to see you. Where are you from?
So I'm based in Leeds, and I just heard about this today. I'm actually part of this recently begun, actually only just kind of launched project, which I think segs in really, really well with what you're talking about. We've got funding from the lottery. I don't know if you've heard of, there's a few organisations, Our Future Leads, Together for Peace and Tidal, and Voluntary Action Leads are the project partners so far, and we're still looking for a final partner. Have you heard about this project already, Peter?
Oh, we met with Andy Goldring last week.
Right. Okay.
About it. Yeah.
Yes.
Is this the right one?
Yes.
Same one?
Yeah. It must have come through Andy Goldring that one of us should definitely be here today, because it's been really fascinating to hear about it. My personal role in it is going to be in one of the wards in Garforth and Swillington ward, and the approach that we've set out kind of is all very much early stages at the moment, but the approach is very much find out what existing actions and ideas are going on, find out what people's needs are, find out how climate emergency, climate action, climate justice is relevant and meaningful to them, and then form community hubs, and there are budgets for actions. But just like this way of organising sounds really, really well.
Were you here when Susan spoke about how she organised it? Pennard?
I missed the first. I probably arrived 3 minutes late, so I think I've heard the whole of the talk. Fascinating.
Great, because it sounds like a very similar. I mean, Susan was on the ground in Pennard, making that happen, and several other community wards in Swansea. So got practical experience of how to make that happen, and the participatory budgeting element of it as well.
Yeah.
Can I just check with you, Joy, which ward are you starting in at the moment?
I'm personally in Garforth and Swillington, and there's people in 3 other areas: Otley, Beeston, and Seacroft, as an initial. And then throughout the project, we'll do a similar approach in, I think, 8 or 12 altogether. And then lots of other. There's also going to be budget for participatory budgeting for other areas to have access to finance for projects. But yeah, our part, it's called the community hubs work package. It's just one of.
What do you call yourselves? Are you community organisers, enablers, builders?
We've the job description, because we're actually still hiring for the 4th area, is development worker.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like there's obviously a whole philosophy in your approach which we can learn a lot from, I think. Some of the team have got many years of community organising in Leeds. My experience is more actually in African countries, so it's the first time I'm doing this kind of work in Leeds. But yeah, I was just saying that I don't want to talk too much about this, but our work package is just part of a few, and there's people going in kind of focusing on themes in education and training, like different themes related to the climate emergency, climate action, climate justice, and then another hub that's all about a citywide approach. So I think it's relevant to lots of us, actually.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, one thing just to really make clear is this is an open project, and the whole what we want to achieve is massive, right? To trying to create a co-operating system, and we want to co-produce that, right? It's not a Swansea project as such. It needs to be something that we all co-produce together. And as you start sort of applying that in Leeds, no doubt you'll see all sorts of things that would make it better, and that we collaborate, you know, on an open source project to build that system. You know, because the system change projects if you think about the amount of resource that Facebook or Twitter or Amazon or any of these other big platforms need, and think about the interaction on Facebook, which is relatively simple, right? It's just like a post, and it's emoticons and comments. And we're talking about quite a lot more complex interaction. So it gives you some sort of idea of what sort of resource we might need collectively if we're going to scale this up.
Mm.
Shannon, do you have any thoughts? I know that you're in Otley.
Yes, I was just listening to what Joy was saying, and it was exactly my thoughts. I'm involved with Otley 2030, so we're going to be one of the first hubs. We're getting a Joy, but I think he's male and from Liverpool, so it's...
Well, he's from Northern Ireland.
It's Northern Ireland, right?
Yeah.
I haven't met him yet. I think he's probably going to come and meet us all fairly soon. So, but I was just a similar feelings how brilliant it would be to be using your approach. And I think some people on the interim committee of Otley 2030 have been on some training or are embarking on some training with One Planet Living, which I've kind of had a look at. But given that what we're about is working with the whole of Otley, I've got a feeling that maybe the approach that I've been hearing about today would maybe fit better, really. You know, we're already quite involved with the schools, so I work with our Future Leeds schools. We're looking to get looking to get a climate curriculum into schools. That was all almost ready to go before lockdown, when we had the funding in place to pay for teachers to attend that training. We've got solar on quite a lot of our schools and our library, that just happened this week through Solar for Schools. So there's a lot of little bits of what we're doing. There's not very many of us doing it, but it seems to me that an approach such as yours, this is not a question really, just saying exactly the same as Joy said, that
well, I can certainly, if we share the project plan with you, you'll see the similarities, and you can sort of run through that. Leeds has declared a climate emergency, haven't they, as I'm aware? Yeah. So
I should say as well that One Planet Living course that your colleagues are doing is not the same as mine. It's with bioregional. It's not tied to the ecological footprint. It just has the name One Planet.
Yes,
so our system is much more a framework that communities and cities can use to reduce their ecological footprint.
Yes.
Well, I was going to say that I think hopefully we have covered the landscape that we're working in, the operational platform overview, and I'd just like to finish off on the how we go forward from here. Do you want to say a little bit about how we might do that, Peter, in terms of an ideal, if you like, initial meeting, and who those participants might be, who could bring different networks to the table to explore the possibilities, and explore the possibilities not just of simply adopting the platform, as you've said, but co-producing it in a way that fits the context that we're in Leeds.
Well, this whole idea of scaling up is, we're exploring the method of that. And actually, I do believe that there's a real opportunity to bring together people who are enthusiastic about this model, before we actually do any work, we could do, for instance, 3 months of preparatory work with people who are enthusiastic across cities all across the UK. I mean, we've actually got people working on it in Mexico and Atlanta. So it really doesn't, you connect with them on Zoom, it doesn't matter which city they come from, right? It's kind of the same, and Barcelona too. So connecting these people, becoming familiar with the process, and then creating a presentation a bit like the one that I just created for Leeds, which is only really a case of swapping out a few slides to make it relevant. And then identifying the anchor organisations, as Josh was saying. So that might be the local authority, obviously. So the anchor organisations are the organisations that have got the capacity and the relationships to roll out the model throughout the city. So the local authority, the CVS, the Council for Voluntary Services, to engage the third sector, the college, obviously to help with engaging young people and also delivering training. And then there'll be certain types of organisations at the university, obviously, and there'll be other entrepreneurial organisations that you'll know of, unique to Leeds, that you'll have on your list. So identifying who those community anchor organisations are, taking your presentation then, which might just, it was 15, similar to what I just did, taking that to them and say, this is what we want to do. We want to create Leeds as a participatory city. We want to, in the first instance, give every community and every school a voice, and that then leading on to democratising other organisations of all kinds. But that's simple, because you can actually control, you've got a certain level of control over doing it in communities and schools. And what that does, it creates a certain number of priorities for all of those. It does something totally unique that's never been done before. And once you've got the priorities, that is the motivation for action then, because you've got all this data that was never there before. You've got all this signalling that was never there before. And you'll be able to see the trends across those. So I'm not sure how many wards there are in Leeds, but let's say, looked like there was like 30 or 40 or something. But you're going to find lots of commonalities, especially around the high impact projects, that almost all of them are going to want to do some sort of renewable energy project, food growing project, mental wellbeing project, certainly projects related to COVID and all this sort of stuff. There's going to be a lot of commonality there, and you're going to have 3 or 4 people opting into working groups in each of the communities. So then you can, the really inspiring piece for me, and I'm really looking forward to this in the very near future, which is connecting those working groups through Zoom, where you've got maybe 100 people on Zoom and they're all doing the same project together. And the capacity of projects like yours, and hopefully like ours, that we'll get up and running in Swansea, is through that community organising, to support those working groups to move together so they can learn together, and we can bring in expertise, obviously, and just really observe those groups and see where the barriers are. And I see this role as trying to remove the barriers, as we go through, just so that there's more and more likelihood of success as working groups embark on that journey. And they've got all that passion, haven't they? But so often we get crushed at some point, or something just becomes too difficult. So I have tried to summarize that in this slide here. Create your participatory project presentation, a bit like what I've just shown you. Identify your community anchor organizations, perhaps create an agreement with the Earth Co-op as to start building out that as an even bigger ambition. Present to your community anchors and secure partnerships. Now I found that actually a really interesting process. I will just share with you the so you're probably familiar with the term MOUs, Memorandums of Understandings. We created MOUs with all the project partners in Swansea, and Swansea Council actually expressed a huge sort of desire to make this happen, and their MOU ended up being of a value, an in-kind value of around £150,000. So basically, if you can go to these different anchor organisations and say, look, we declared climate and ecological emergency, there's a whole bunch of other things we need to sort out. Will you collaborate? Most people will want to collaborate. It'll be tricky getting money out of them, obviously, but they will probably have some sort of capacity and resource that they will be prepared to offer, even if it's some staff time, half a day a week, right? Or maybe an empty shop at the weekends or something like that. All of that, if you start noting that down, all of that has a value. It has obviously a real opportunity, and it's useful, but it also has a value. So you can start adding all of this up into an in-kind value, which will help to leverage for more support funding in the future. So we were quite surprised actually how much, because the council actually said it's got this new post, it wants to dedicate one full-time officer to this project going forward for the next 3 years indefinitely. And so that was just a massive in-kind contribution. And then obviously you can build on that, can't you? Swansea Council have said this, and then you go to the DVLA, and you go to the BT office, and then you go to the Housing Association, and everybody starts chipping in. And I think this is going to be a really nice way of building up a collaborative, a cooperative approach to tackling the problem going forward. So I don't know if that helped, but was it clear? Hopefully it's in these steps anyway, to try to simplify it in these steps here. Yeah. MOUs with project partners, and then you don't really need to do this, the hardest bit, which is point 7, because you've already done that, which is pitched to funding to make the project happen. So you're at a massive advantage. But there also, there are other opportunities, I think, to gain more funding to support communities. Obviously, you have some funding in your budget to be able to do that participatory budgeting and support the priorities to turn through to action. But I think there will be more funding out there that you could also leverage from high net worth individuals, for instance, that really want to see Leeds as a successful and pioneering city. And there'll be numerous other grants, I'm sure, that you could apply towards. And then crowdfunding is the other thing, which is potentially something like creating a bond for Leeds, which means that people could essentially buy like £100 or £100 minimum bond, and you could essentially raise money that way to invest in new projects. There we are.
Okay, well, are there any final questions or comments before we sum up and close?
I just asked if Peter could share the presentation.
Sure.
Would it be possible to have a copy?
No problem. Someone got your email? Josh, you've got emails.
Did you get them by registering for the event?
If you've registered, I will have your email, yeah.
Okay, great.
Also, just to say, Joy, that we're recording this, and this will be on the Watch Again page of the Leeds Festival of Kindness, Compassion and Wellbeing. So it will be up on the website for a year, but I'm sure sending the presentation direct would also be helpful to engage with your organisations.
Yeah.
I wonder, Susan, would you like to say anything? I mean, Susan's the ones that you'll be talking to most from this, well, at some point, because Susan's got the knowledge on the ground. So Susan, I don't know if you want to say anything to finish.
I'm not sure really. I think everything's been covered. Yeah, I'm at the end of an email. If you have any questions, then it's Peter. You will share my email address with everyone, I'm sure.
Sure.
That's good to meet you all.
Absolutely.
Good to meet you. Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. So for me, a participatory city is part of a wellbeing economy and a kinder world, because it offers us opportunities to create meaningful projects and make a difference in our own places and spaces and in the world as a whole. The vision of this project is huge in the sense that Earth Co-op has an aspiration to link projects up globally, but starting locally and building the infrastructure locally is hugely important. So effectively, it's a major step in creating systemic kindness as far as I'm concerned. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining in. Do watch out for further conversations or with the Catalysts for a Kinder World. There are some more great events coming up, including Evolving Democracy, Kinder Media, and other kinds of projects that, if you're interested in this, I'm sure you'll be interested in. Pass it on to your friends and have a look at the Watch Again page on the KinderLeeds website. Thank you, Peter, for sharing this, and thank you, everybody, for participating and joining in. Okay.
Thanks so much, Josh. Nice to meet you, everybody.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Thanks.